This is the most pro that iPhone Pro has ever been, although the changes might seem minimal to the average user upgrading from an iPhone 14 Pro. For everyone else, the changes are bloody fantastic, and the Pro features that the iPhone 15 Pro has are quite frankly incredible. For starters, I can now take footage that looks as good as this. But before I go into the new features and what makes it so good, let me share my 2p piece on the design. In my opinion, this is the nicest looking iPhone that they've ever made, even nicer than the iPhone X, which has been my favourite up until this point. It's not as harsh and as angular as the flatter phones that they've made in the past few generations, and it's not as rounded as anything that came before that. It sort of sits somewhere in between. Compare it to the last few generations and it's just so much nicer with the delicate curves of the titanium chassis and the subtle curve of the glass. Now, not only does it look great, it feels great in hand, and gestures that require swiping no longer feel angular and sharp as there's no angles to catch your fingers on. And as for the use of the titanium in the build, I'm all for it. I think the colour really pops and it looks fantastic against darker cases like the aramid fibre case I'm using here from Pitaka, who have sponsored this episode. This titanium consequently means it's slightly lighter than the previous phones, which is a welcome benefit of using titanium. Other design changes are a thinner bezel, which admittedly isn't that noticeable coming from an iPhone 14 Pro, but coming from an earlier device or a non-Pro device, the bezels are a hell of a lot smaller and will be a welcome change for those upgrading from earlier and non-Pro iPhones. Now, the dynamic island is very much unchanged and unfortunately is still criminally underused. I actually loved this feature when they introduced it with the iPhone 14 Pro. It seemed like a good way to hide the necessary tech that makes iPhone, whilst also offering a theoretically functional area which would be redundant otherwise. However, there aren't a great deal of developers that have made use of the dynamic island, but when they do, it's a great experience, like Uber, for example, which gives you your ride status, or the parking app Ringo, which gives you the exact time left on your parking ticket. I think maybe developers have been a little bit slow on the uptake, possibly because only 2 phones out of the 22 phones that supported iOS 16 had Dynamic Island. Now, with the release of the new phones, out of 24 phones that support iOS 17, 6 phones have Dynamic Island, and every Apple phone released this year has it. So I would expect that this is the year we'll see more developers make use of it, and you'll start to see apps crop up with new Dynamic Island features, or at least that'd be my guess. But perhaps the biggest change in design, or the change that has the biggest implications for me, is the addition of USB-C. Yes, this isn't a new technology, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Apple should have done this years ago, but better late than never, I guess. Regardless of how late the USB-C train is, I'm glad it's finally here because firstly I can stop carrying around lightning cables to charge my phone and use pretty much the same connector for nearly every single device that I own. And more importantly, it gives me a direct connection for a ton of peripherals, including the most important, SSD drives. Now this opens up a world of possibilities when using the iPhone to shoot footage with. I can now record 4K 60fps ProRes log video format. And most of you are probably wondering what the hell that means. In simple terms, your camera in the standard format records a preset color profile with a preset quality, and that quality then gets compressed slightly. Normally not that noticeable for the average user, but for people like me, you do notice a drop in quality and flexibility. Now, recording in ProRes, it means, for all intents purposes, it's visually lossless, so you're getting a much higher quality picture, but the file size is much bigger. And when you record in a log, what that means is it's grey and boring and dull when you look at the footage, but the reason being is that it retains a lot more information in that video footage that allows you then a lot more flexibility when editing it in post-processing. This is so important for the pro user, to the point where you probably didn't even realise that from the point that I showed you the SSD drive plugged into the iPhone, I've actually been filming with the iPhone 15 Pro. That's what this is being filmed on, right now. There's the hard drive. Power it up. Plugged into a phone. That's how good the footage is. It's insane. You can literally use this and it's nearly indistinguishable from my DSLR, which is now over there on the floor with a full frame sensor. Unreal. Well, let's go back to the big camera. It's just such a good tool for creators, and I can't actually believe the quality that you can get out of this thing. Now, to put it through its paces, I thought I'd take it out to the local butterfly house to shoot a short film using ProRes HDR rather than the log format to see what its own colour processing is like. So, let me show you what you can expect from the camera on the iPhone 15 Pro. Of course, shooting with the iPhone with a rig setup, you're going to look a bit mad.
Hello.
But putting that aside, it's hard to ignore that the footage is incredible. Now, one concern I had about this new ProRes ability over USB-C was the heat levels. This seems to be something that a lot of people on Twitter have been reporting, and not just when doing something intensive like this, but simply when using the phone for general use. Now, this isn't something that I have experienced in my general use, but I wanted to run it through a stress test to see how much this phone heats up. So I took my case off, set up a thermal imaging camera and recorded a continuous 10-minute video of 4K 30fps log footage straight to an SSD. You can see the iPhone increasing heat slightly along with the SSD, however after 10 minutes the iPhone's temperature only went up by 2 degrees in the centre and then remained stable. Even the hottest area of the phone, which was just under the lenses, went up to only 33 degrees. To put this in perspective, the average skin temperature is around 33 degrees, so the iPhone got no hotter than holding someone's hand. So those are those concerns debunked. And I'd go as far as saying I'm more than impressed with this thermal capability. It performs way better than I expected in this respect. After all the fuss online, I kind of thought it was going to reach the melting point of glass, but it turns out that's just all hot air. No pun intended. Now, although I've primarily used the USB-C for shooting video, it can shoot raw photo format directly to external drives too, and these photos are just as fantastic and offer similar flexibility to that when you film in log format. Now, to protect my brand new iPhone while I was out testing the camera, I used a Pitaka case, who have been an absolute gem and sponsored this episode. But to tell you the truth, with or without their sponsorship, I've actually been flirting with Pitaka cases for years. I've even shot one in the past to test the strength of the incredible aramid fibre construction. Now, aramid fibre is short for aromatic polyamide, And this is a lightweight, durable and highly resistant to impact material. It's used in a variety of military and aerospace technologies, including bulletproof protective gear. Hence why I shot it with a shotgun. Now, the fibres themselves are thinner than a human hair, but can be weaved into stronger stuff than steel. So if you're looking for a strong but thin case that complements the iPhone 15 Pro, then Pitaka are absolutely the place to look, and I'll drop a link below to Pitaka, and if you want to check out how bulletproof the case is, or was, go and take a look at my review of Pitaka in the description below too. Now, back to the iPhone 15 Pro and the last big change of the design that I think is worthy of a round of applause, and that's the new action button. This takes the place of the mute switch and is actually really bloody useful, but I do have a few considerations to mention with this one. The function allows you to select between a handful of pretty basic options like silent mode, focus mode, open camera, flashlight, voice memo and magnifier. And it does, however, allow you to use shortcuts, but if you aren't au fait with Apple shortcuts, then the basic functionality you might actually find a little bit lacking. And I think a lot of people will probably just end up using it as a silent button, very much like the old rocker. However, if you're willing to get your hands a little bit dirtier, the integration with Apple shortcuts unlocks some huge potential. So far, I've seen people use it to lock and unlock their Teslas, open garage doors, and in my case, I can press it and it'll tell me what whiskey I should drink next.
You don't need any whiskey. It's 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. What you need is help.
Jokes aside, you could do things like set it up to tie your laces if you're wearing Nikes with the power lace option. Or you could do what I've done, and I've set mine to launch dictation and then save that dictation as a new task in my to-do list, because I'm forever thinking of things I need to do. But often I've not got time to unlock my phone, find Todoist, open it up, find the project I want it in, and then add the note. Sure, I could use Siri, but again, I'd have to go backwards and forwards with having a full-on bloody conversation to add less than 5-word note to my to-do list. I can just press this button now, say the task, and it'll drop it straight in there for later. If you're a whiz with shortcuts, it really does crack this feature wide open. And if you're using the iPhone 15 Pro's action button for anything other than the standard stuff, I want to know about it. So make sure you pop what you're using it for in the comments below. I'm super genuinely interested to see what you guys have come up with. Hell, I'll even pin the best use of it in the comments. So go and drop it below. Although slight criticism here, and I don't know why they've done this, but they've done it so that you can only press it and have one action. They haven't done multiple interactions with it. I thought they might have done something like double press or hold or single press or even triple press to do different actions. I'm a little bit disappointed, in fact, that they haven't done that. I thought that was a good idea, but they've missed a trick there. Of course, the solution would be to create a multiple choice menu that pops up on a shortcut that does different things, but then you're just faffing around with the screen again. The whole point of this tactile button, I believe, is to allow you to do something quickly without having to faff around interacting with your phone. Oh well, that's pretty much the main changes for the outside. Now internally, the phone is actually very similar to the iPhone 14 Pro, and it's got similar specs across the board except for a new GPU. Now this is important. During the announcement, they made several claims that companies are bringing AAA titles to the iPhone, such as Death Stranding, Resident Evil Village and Assassin's Creed Mirage. Now this is great and all, but unfortunately they haven't actually released any of these games, so I've been unable to test these claims, but from the demos they showed, it does look quite good. And it does support full ray tracing, which is very impressive, because even consoles like the PS4 weren't capable of ray tracing. And I can't wait to test this out, although you just know that the control is going to look something like this hellscape, rendering these titles nigh on unplayable without a third-party controller. But this does lead on to some speculation about the future of Apple TV. If the new A17 Pro is in fact capable of running games at near AAA quality, and developers actually decide to start porting these games to the ecosystem, then if they brought the A17 Pro to the Apple TV, it could potentially make the Apple TV a decent competitor in the console market. Anyway, that's just speculation, of course. Either way, this is a big jump up in power, but only time will tell, and the proof will be in the pudding. Overall, is the iPhone 15 Pro a great upgrade? Well, as I mentioned at the start, if you're an average user that's coming from an iPhone 14 Pro, then there might not be a great deal to whet your appetite. But if you're a pro user and an avid camera user, or just looking to upgrade from literally anything other than an iPhone 14 Pro, I think you're going to be blown away with what I truly believe is the best iPhone that Apple have ever made, and certainly the most pro the iPhone Pro has ever been. If you want to have a chat about the new iPhone 15 Pro, I'll be online for the next hour or so after this episode goes live, replying to all of your comments. So drop a hi in there if you want to have a chat. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. And remember to take a look at Pitaka at the link in the description, because they are awesome. But other than that, guys, thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you back for another episode of STU'S Reviews soon.